Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Pragmatic Bodybuilding. So, today, no training advice for you. I know that's probably going to disappoint some of you, but I'll get back to that with some future videos. But today, I want to touch on my personal feelings regarding my natural status. And of course, I'm a lifetime natural athlete. I'll say that right away with tons of confidence. But this subject, I know for many, it triggers a lot of emotions, negativity, skepticism, and honestly, I feel far too many people waste their valuable time and energy on it, and I usually don't bother making videos like this because I just don't like the drama. I'm not going to put out any type of shock type content, just for the sake of some views. I focus on putting out quality content, with the hopes of helping you guys become a better version of yourself. But I'm human like you, and it's hard to ignore those who question my status 100% of the time. And typically, I do ignore the skepticism and the negative judgments for my own mental well being. That's always going to be my best practice. But at the same time, I also know, sharing all of my experiences, even those outside of, training and nutrition, might help you out, not just to become a better bodybuilder, but maybe even a better human. So every once in a while, I do like to use situations like this as a teaching opportunity. So, just to give some background about myself, I was raised by parents who taught me to always be honest, to treat and respect others well, to respect my body, and to make sure that I'm leading by example. And those values have always guided me, whether, it's in the realm of bodybuilding or, just life itself. And when I first started training back in 1986, my mindset was never about taking some shortcuts or doing something that would go against the values that was instilled in me by my parents. So it truly was about seeing what I could build naturally because that aligned far better to my values. So, this Reddit thread is just simply crazy to me. And to be honest with you guys, I'm actually more sad for them than really pissed off at them because I know that responding angrily or defensively isn't going to break through to these types of people. It just further flames their negativity and skepticism. So instead, I simply respond with my own firsthand experience of how my mindset was just like theirs. And my hope is that it plants a seed to where it eventually gets watered so they can grow not just physically, but mentally and emotionally in order to tap into their full potential. Going back to some history here. So back in 1999, I was a big time skeptic myself. If I seen a guy back then who is basically where I'm at now, I would have said exactly what those people in that Reddit thread say about me now. There's no way this guy is natural, not that big, that dry, that conditioned, especially in his 50s. And there's really, two main reasons for that as far as like being quick to judge. And just to be blunt, I was ignorant and I had a big ego. I was ignorant because my circle was just too small. I only knew what I knew, and I was surrounding myself with like minded people who reinforced my limited perspective. And my ego, it was huge, because in my head, no one could outwork me and be ahead of me if they were truly natural. And now, I mean, I totally cringe, just saying this, but that was my mindset back then. And I'm not proud of it at all. But if we fast forward, about a year later, I was prepping for shows in 2000, everything started to shift for me for the better. I was improving. And no, it's not because I was on gear. It was because I finally got out of my own way and my mindset started to shift more positively. My circle expanded and I started to allow humility to take the lead. And I started learning from people who challenged my way of thinking. And one of those people was Bob Bell, owner and president of the WMBF. He challenged my approach and he gave, bodybuilding advice to me that led to my best physique at that point in time, far better than ever before. And that, of course, had me realizing that my ego, my ignorance, and, a lot of insecurities was actually holding myself back for many, many years. So, at first I was resisting, his advice, but he was super persistent. He was in my ear, and eventually he broke through my thick skull and he opened the door for more optimism. And, I've never really looked back since. And to this day, I'm super grateful for his time and his willingness to challenge a very stubborn young man. So if you happen to be watching this, Bob, I know I've told you many times, but I'm going to tell you again. Thank you so much for basically bringing those walls down. I really do appreciate that. And, since then, it's been a different story for me. I've stayed humble. I've surrounded myself with people who have differing perspectives. I've continued to, put in the educated work that many skeptics, either don't fully understand or simply aren't willing to do. And of course, the results speak for themselves. I've slowly but surely have gotten better over time. And I know there's a lot of skepticism, about me today. And I know I can't eradicate it completely with a video like this. But if I can reach one person, with this video and do what Bob did for me, it's so worth my time to pay it forward. And, Reddit can be pretty wild, as we all know. And, I see the same mindset in a lot of people there that I once had, quick judgments, off based assumptions, ego, insecurities. And I know how hard it is to break free from that type of mindset, especially when you're ingrained in a camp with like minded people, because I've lived it. And, those people on Reddit and maybe even you watching, you might not ever be like me, just like I'm never going to be like you or anyone else. So just keep in mind, that comparison can be a thief of joy. So you should focus on you and you only and build your own masterpiece. And a real question to ask yourself, am I doing everything in my power to be my best, physically, mentally, and emotionally? For me, I try to be my best. And even now, I still have plenty of room to improve. And really, the best way to do that is to keep my eyes on my own journey. It's a waste of my time and it's misguided energy judging others' natty or not status. I don't need to tear someone else down to make myself feel better. I've lived that life and I know how empty it is. We need to be better and to do better for ourselves. Now, I want to be clear here. If someone decides to take gear, that's their choice. And as long as it doesn't impact me or others in a negative way, I can respect that choice. I don't view those who choose to go that route as bad people. We all have our own reasons for doing what we do. But with this said, I'd encourage those who are thinking about it to really research it and to truly think about how your future self would think about that decision. Personally, I can look back in hindsight through my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and even now, halfway into my 50s, I've evolved as a human. I've matured, and there's been some choices in life I wish I can go back on and, have a do over. So, again, if you're young, especially, there's no rush with this bodybuilding thing. Muscle doesn't always bring you happiness and it surely doesn't define you as a person. So, in my humble opinion, it's important to find happiness within, regardless of how your outer shell looks. And again, taking gear for me is simply never aligned with my values and how I wanted my journey to be. I've always wanted to see how far I can go naturally. And after all these years, I've never regretted my decision to do this naturally. When my final rep is completed, I want to look in the mirror and say to myself, that was all my work. And that peace of mind has always meant more to me than any larger than life physique ever could. So, staying natural all these years is something that I'm really proud of. It's about my commitment, it's about my unwavering consistency, it's about smart training, it's about staying healthy, and it's about evolving my approach as life changes. Some years, steady progress, some other years, it's just maintenance, some other years, it's really not all that great. But through it all, I've stayed passionate and grounded with how I roll with my journey. And as a coach, I coach natural athletes for a living and I walk the same path as they do. So, again, what my parents instilled in me, I'm leading by example. And at the end of the day, no trophy, no titles, no physique is worth sacrificing what I truly value. And if I ever cross that line, I lose far more than I could ever gain. My peace of mind, my example to my family, the trust that I've built in the natural community, and most importantly, my self respect. That price is simply way too high. So, yes, I am a lifetime natural, not because it's been easy, not because it guarantees the biggest physique, but because it allows me to wake up every day knowing I stay true to who I am. That's the legacy I want to leave. And if anything, I'm going to challenge you to allow humility to lead as opposed to your ego in all things bodybuilding and in life too. It's the best gains I've ever experienced in my bodybuilding career, more so the gains with life in general. So thanks for listening. And if this resonates with you, I'd definitely love to hear about your story. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, not just with me, but so others can read. And maybe we can all help each other. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.